Hello and welcome to another episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Brendon Bigley, my co-host at NPC, Next Portable Console. Hey, Brendon.
Hello, John. It's an honor to be nominated. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining me. We have Federico is off doing secret things. I'm sure that probably in the next episode of Mac Stories Unwind, you'll hear a little bit about Federico's adventures. So I don't want to spoil it. I'll let him spill the beans when we record that show. But I thought Brendon and I could get together today to do something kind of adjacent to both NPC and App Stories and talk about apps that are related to gaming. Now, not games themselves. We'll have some of that in the post-show for AppStories Plus listeners. But for the main show, I wanted to talk about the games that the apps that we use in and around playing games on mobile devices and other platforms. But before we get to that, because the betas have just been released for the public betas for all of Apple's platforms, I thought we would pause for a moment and talk a little bit about the Games app, because I think that when this was first rumored, everybody assumed that the Games app was going to be a storefront, that Apple was dividing the App Store into two parts. And I think a lot of people thought that sounded like a good idea. And then when it wasn't that, the reaction has been, oh, this is just Game Center reconstituted into an app. And I don't think it's really quite fair to characterize it as such. But right before we started, Brendon and I were kind of scrolling back through our library, because one of the things that this app has is a library tab that contains all of the games that you've ever downloaded. And so it's kind of fun to scroll all the way back to the beginning and see what you have in that catalog of games. And for me, after 10 plus years, it's obviously a lot of games. So
yeah, what's the earliest game you have on the list, John?
All right. So the vast majority of these old games, they actually will list apps games that you can't even download anymore. So if they aren't already on your phone, they're not going to be playable. But I have Qwordy, Quordy, which I believe was a word game, judging from the icon, but I cannot download it any longer. How about you?
For me, it's a game called Tanzen, Relaxing Tangram Puzzles, which, let me tell you, John, still available to download.
Oh, that's impressive.
Remarkable, honestly. I'm really surprised by that. But there are some real hits that I totally forgot about. Some like real early, I have an iPod Touch and I'm in probably high school era video games, 16 years ago, at least is what it says here, is when I added these to my library. Unbelievable that some of these are still available, but most of them are not. Most of them got caught up.
Oh man, 16 years ago. This is incredible. Yeah, it's a long time ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah, unreal. It's quite a collection, and it's just still a beta app. It's a little bit there are a few bugs here and there, but there are a lot of classic games in here. I think it does make it easier to kind of scroll back through time, and there are different ways to sort and filter it. And you can also access, just the Apple Arcade games or achievements and all this stuff. So it is kind of, there's no doubt that this is a consolidation of all the features of Game Center into a single app. But I do think that the idea of doing things like including events in the Games app is a good one, because it never really made sense to me that you had to go to the App Store in order to find an event, because you've already bought the game or downloaded the game, and now you have to go back to the store to see if there's an event. This lets developers publicize their events, which I think is good from keeping games top of mind from a developer standpoint.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about on NPC. I remember when this was first announced, or maybe even when this first came out. Or maybe this wasn't even on a podcast. Maybe this was just you and I talking. I just remember us having a conversation about, I think, the most critical piece of all of this, which is how do you keep people checking the app? Like, what is the incentive for users to continue looking into this app? Because I agree with you. I love all of the new promotional aspects, especially for developers, like smaller developers who are really trying to compete with the likes of, Clash of Clans or whatever, who is getting top tier promotion every time they do anything. But how are you getting users to check this app constantly? I think is going to be the forever question of this app existing.
Yes, and I think that it's probably at this moment a little light on those things, frankly. But it's a start. One is the events. Another one is the fact that you can now take these games that are essentially just solo mobile games, and you can use challenges to kind of do an asynchronous kind of challenge your friends to games. They're trying to make it more of a community type thing. Whether that works or not, who knows?
Who knows?
It's not really for me, I don't think. I have not done it yet. I have to do it to test for the fall, but yeah, that'll be the thing.
I'll challenge you at something, John. I don't know what yet. I'll challenge you at Tanzen relaxing tangram puzzles.
Okay.
The video game from 16 years ago.
Who can do the most in the least amount of time or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, but you know, it is it is an uphill battle because, as we said from the library, we're talking about 16 years of habits for how you play your mobile games. And are people going to start going to the Games app to launch their games, or are they just going to do whatever they've done in the past? You know, whatever happens to be on the home screen. Yeah, right. So we'll see. But let's dive in to some of the apps that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I want to start, I guess, with I'm gonna skip over our first category, the companion apps. I want to get back to those in a minute, but I want to start with trackers. And by trackers, I just mean any kind of app you can use to track the video games that you're playing, whether they're games on your mobile devices, whether they're games on consoles, PC, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And talk about some of those, because I know, for instance, I know that you're a big fan of a web app actually called Backlogged, which is what you use, right?
Yeah, I'm a diehard for Backlogged. A lot of that stems from me being a big fan of Letterboxd. I've been a Letterboxd user for a really long time. And when I started to get into the idea of wanting to track what games I was playing, you know, for things like Into the Aether, one of the other podcasts I do, it became a question of how do I find an app that feels the most like Letterboxd, not just in terms of its user interface and its design language, but more specifically the ability to add friends, make lists, share those lists, because it became increasingly important for me as we did some of these like big kind of console roundup episodes and all this stuff, these like big retrospectives of saying like, these are the 30 best games for the Nintendo DS. We talked about them on this episode. Also, if you go into the description, you can click on this link and see them and see all this metadata about them and add them to your own list, et cetera, et cetera. So that social aspect became really important to me over time. The biggest hang up with Backlogged, and I think the reason a lot of people who bail from it end up bailing from it, is because it's a web app. I think that is probably one of the biggest reasons. I can't speak to the Android side of things because I haven't used an Android phone in probably like 2 years at this point, and I haven't tested this, but an interesting thing about iOS that I learned recently is that, you know, first of all, I think most people, I would imagine, who listen to this podcast are very well aware that you could just save a website as an app on your home screen.
Right.
What I didn't know, and the thing that has completely unlocked the way I use Backlogged in the past like 6 months, is that you can take that web app that you've saved to your home screen, add it to a home screen that you've deactivated. So just like build a home screen out with a bunch of web apps on them, deactivate them, and then they are searchable via Spotlight from that point forward, even if the home screen is deactivated, which for me was huge because I have a one-page home screen. I've been that way for years. I'm probably never going to change my ways realistically.
Yeah.
And the fact that I needed to use one of those very key slots for Backlogged always meant that I would just revert to using Safari, just like open Safari, go to Backlogged instead. But now that I have all these other web apps saved on this, you know, abandoned home screen that's, you know, just disappeared into the negative zone, it means I could use Spotlight to access Backlogged, and it's great. It's a much better experience using it as
that's a fantastic tip, because I've run into something similar before where I'll have a couple of different web apps and it's like, I don't really have room for them, but if I remove them completely from my home screen, then they're just gone. I mean, they don't get saved to the app library if you take them off the home screen. But having an invisible home screen and being able to search for them, that's a really good way to do it. I think that's you could do that with a lot of things. I know Federico, one of the things he's been talking about recently is how, especially on the iPad, a lot of web apps are more powerful than the native apps that are available on the iPad. Yes. And this is a good solution for that kind of thing if you don't have space for them or only want to have one home screen. For me on the trackers, I'll admit I kind of go in and out of trackers pretty frequently because there are both dedicated video game trackers out there and then more general media trackers. And I've used both. I think when it comes to the ones that are specific to video games, I have used Backlogged. I don't have I don't have the same needs as you in terms of having lists and the social aspects of it.
Yeah.
And I actually don't, although I do like to go to it occasionally. I do like to see like what you guys are doing on Into the Aether, and I know a few other people who are using that service, and it's always fun to see what other people are playing and get some like top lists. But that's kind of a secondary thing for most of my tracking. So in the past, what I've been using is either Game Track or something like a Game Pal. Now, Game Track has been around for quite a while. It's got a really nice design, and it has built some community aspects to it. But again, I don't really use those in that app so much. I just prefer the design and the ability to build my lists in it, as well as to be able to connect console accounts. You know, things like your PlayStation account, you can connect to it, and Steam, I believe, which just helps bring in your games and helps you build the list without going to a lot of trouble. So that one's really good, although I haven't used it a lot lately. GamePal is one that is relatively new, and one of the twists of that one is that it has kind of a journaling focus to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's focused on doing things like taking a lot of notes. You can even, if you're a paid subscriber, give yourself tasks. You know, you create a task list of side quests for a game, for instance, without having to put it in reminders or things or something like that. Which I mean, who really wants to, have side quest tasks in their task manager alongside their usual work?
Put it in Game kind of person. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very. And I know people do it. I mean, I've actually done it before too. It's just that's a lot. Once you go down that path, you're going to have a task manager with an awful lot of stuff in it. So I think that you're probably better served with a game or an app like GamePal that has that kind of functionality built into it. It has a release calendar and that sort of thing too, which I always find useful because I lose track of when games are coming out all the time.
Yeah. We built an Airtable specifically to track game release schedules for Into the Aether, and then over time started mapping our episodes to it as well. It would be like, okay, in this episode came out on this date and we talked about it here. It ended up being a database that we built that was like, oh, this is valuable enough that we should probably offer it as like a Patreon reward. But it all stemmed from me not finding really adequate game release calendars anywhere on the internet and being like, why don't we just build one for ourselves and use that? So it's nice to see apps like this starting to launch with better release lineups, because it's a thing, honestly, like a little bit of a bummer, but a lot of the websites that did the best job at covering that stuff have now shut down. Like, and IGN doesn't have one. Like, IGN's going to be around forever. They're basically the Stonehenge of games media, but like they don't have like a dedicated page. It's like, here's everything that's coming out. Whereas a lot of other websites that no longer exist did, and that's what I relied on until I was like, okay, I'll just do it myself. So I'm glad to see. I liked GamePal a lot when I tried out GamePal. Again, I already kind of have my thing, but anytime a new app like this comes out, I'm always interested in checking them out. The bigger thing for me is like, there's obviously an incentive from a community building aspect to want to point as many people towards the same thing as possible. And that just means pointing them towards something that is as widely usable as possible. And it's kind of hard to beat a web app in that way. But I really love GamePal. And GameTrack is another one that I used for a long time for a thing that I'll talk about when we talk about a different app, actually, a little bit down the line.
Very good. Very good. Well, two others that were worth mentioning too are Gaming Buddy and Switch Buddy. I think Switch Buddy is interesting because it started its life as a way to easily get screenshots off the first Nintendo Switch, which was a many, many step process. Federico at one point did a shortcut that actually did some of this, but Switch Buddy turned that process into an app and made it easy, but then built out around that a list of all the Switch games that are available with reviews and all that kind of stuff. Really nice widgets, calendar widgets for when games are coming out and when you can anticipate them coming. And Gaming Buddies like that, but it's broader. It's, it incorporates all video games and I think one of the things that I guess distinguishes it is the fact that you can get to a lot of reviews and trailers and things from there, which I think if you're looking for that kind of stuff without having to comb through a bunch of different websites, that's kind of a nice way to short circuit the process and get to what you're looking for pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm a Switch Buddy diehard. Like I use it many, many, many times a week, honestly, because I'm always capturing screenshots in games and needing to move them back and forth between places. And Switch Buddy is, I mean, it's my buddy. It will be forever. And it's been interesting to watch that developer, Philip, I think is their name, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just over time expand what that app is capable of. And honestly, I mean, no shade on Switch Buddy. I think Gaming Buddy was the right move for that. I think making a separate app that is all about that was the right choice. And it's great. I love the widgets, actually. I don't use them at the moment, again, because one home screen, but I now that I'm thinking about it, I could probably throw them on the control center or something. Not control center. You know what I mean?
The Today View.
The Today View. Yes, exactly. Yes.
The screen that nobody remembers exists anymore.
Which I use exclusively for the weather.
Yeah, I put the weather in like a
time
calendar.
Zones also.
I do like a calendar. I think on mine. That's a good question. This is a good tangent. What do you have on there?
Yeah. Okay. Wait. I'll show you. Okay. I have the weather. I have my battery indicators to show how charged everything is. I have both gentler streak and activity, and then I have a time zone calendar with 4 time zones: New York, which is where I live; Chicago, which is where my co-host Steven for Into the Aether lives; Rome for Federico; and then Tokyo, because that's where I just was for 2 months. Which I'll probably end up changing to Paris, realistically. So those are the 4 time zones I need to care about.
We probably use the same time zone app. Is it the World Clock one?
Oh yeah. It's just the default World Clock.
Yeah. So I have on that Today notification screen, I've got the batteries, I've got the Now Playing widget, and a list view of my calendar. Those are the only things now. I actually, unlike you, I do typically have a second home screen, and that's mainly widgets, and that's where I put my weather.
That makes sense. Yeah, I also have, lock screen widgets. I have it's not going to show up on camera probably. Lock screen widgets. I have weather and just 2 reminders on my to-do list.
Very nice, very nice. Well, all right, I want to ask you about an app that I think you probably have used in the past. I want to talk about some game-specific companion apps. And
sure.
In particular, the first 2 I want to talk to are by the same developer, Jeffrey. And the first one is ACNH Travel Guide. Have you used this app?
I have. It's a trilogy of apps.
Yes, right.
All 3 of these top apps we have in the rundown are by Jeffrey Quicken, I think is the developer's name. It's ACNH Travel Guide for Animal Crossing New Horizons is the first one. It's an app that is specifically for tracking fossils, fish, and bugs in that game. Oh, and art, I think, as well. I think you can also track the art that you've been getting as well. This is like purely down center field for this is perfect for me in particular.
I figured it was, yeah.
Because when I'm a huge Animal Crossing fan. I literally just posted a really long video about Animal Crossing on my YouTube channel the other day. I love Animal Crossing. I have played every single one. I'm a big fan. And the thing that I'm obsessed with more than anything else in Animal Crossing, which if you don't know, quick recap of Animal Crossing. It's a game where you run around, you're a human in a world filled with animals, and it's tied to a real-time calendar and a real-time clock. So everything that's happening in real life, holidays, things like that, will also happen in the video game, but that also means you need to very slowly over the course of time, accumulate wealth and buy all these things, buy stuff to customize your house and, buy clothes that make you look how you want and customize your island however you want, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing I'm always the most interested in is the museum. There's a museum feature in those games, which allows you to just get a bug net or a fishing rod and go out and just catch fish and bugs. And again, because it's tied to the real-time calendar, there are certain bugs in fish that show up during certain times of year, during certain weather patterns, like is it snowing, is it raining, what time of day is it, et cetera, et cetera. Some things only show up at sunset, for example, on like palm trees, whatever. And I love that more than anything else in those games. So every time a new Animal Crossing game comes out, number one priority for me is filling the museum. And there had never been an app I used like this until one for Animal Crossing New Leaf, which was on the 3DS years ago. And I used it for that, and it was great for tracking. And then this one came out almost immediately with New Horizons, which I was really impressed by.
I don't know how they get this. This is a deep app. There's a lot of content in it. I don't know how they get this out so fast.
I was really impressed by how quickly this came out. There were a couple apps that were trying to do this, but ACNA's Travel Guide by Jeffrey Quicken was and still is, I think, the king of all of them. It is
it's got a great design. The design is just really nice.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful app. It's really well done, and I found it hugely helpful. It's just like, here's every bug, here's every fish. You can check off which ones you have and which ones you don't. But also, if you tap on any of them, it will show you like exactly when and where to get them. It's amazing. Oh, also like how much they sell for if you want to sell them instead of donating them to the museum, etc.
Right.
It's great. It's a great app. I'm a really big fan, and immediately when this came out, it was like all eyes on Jeffrey for any other app he releases.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, with your video about Animal Crossing, I have got to get my hands on that mod that you were talking about. What was that for? What's that game?
Oh, for City
called
Folk.
City Folks. Yeah, that sounded really nice.
Yeah, it's a ROM hack or like a patch for Animal Crossing City Folk, which is a game that came out on the Nintendo Wii, which had just a lot of issues. I won't get into all of them. You can go watch the video, but one of them, for example, is like there was code in the game that made it so if you ran around your island, it was supposed to like keep track of desire paths that you were finding as you were running around. So like, the grass would kind of dissipate and turn into dirt that would show the places where you ran all the time, and that's how you could create paths in your town. But the code was bugged, so it meant that grass never grew back. So if you ran around your island at all, it would just like destroy all of the grass.
Oh no!
Little fixes like that, but the biggest one for me, and the one that I think you're probably the most interested in, is it removes the need to use a Wiimote and nunchuck to play the game, and allows you to use like a regular controller.
Yeah,
huge.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, "Oh yeah, I can play this game now." This is like, because I'm not a big fan of playing Wii games on other handhelds, because it's just so hard with trying to remap all the controls.
Yeah, I got a modded Nintendo Wii about a year ago, 2 years ago at this point, specifically because I was like, I hate emulating the Nintendo Wii. I'm just gonna play on original hardware from now on.
I agree.
If I'm ever gonna do that again.
Yeah, I gave away my Wii, so that's not an option right now. Although they're so cheap, I might buy it. I may end up buying a used one at some point.
I would recommend it.
Yeah. So Jeffrey, we have a couple of other of Jeffrey's apps on here. We have Tears of the Kingdom Travel Guide, TOTK Travel Guide.
Yeah.
And that one, I mean, very similar in its approach. It maps out the entire game. All the levels, and it kind of gives you a really just a map of where you can go and what you can find. I mean, it's there's so much in that game. You can find the Korok seeds, do all the different things just by using that app, and check them off. Which I think that to me is one of the things that's most useful about these apps, is that they really give you the ability to, in a sense, create checklists and know how much progress you've been making.
Yeah, this one in particular I found really helpful because when it came to Breath of the Wild and also Tears of the Kingdom, there were a couple things that I really gravitated towards immediately. Like number one are the towers, which as you get the towers, it unlocks the ability to see the rest of the map. So just being able to check those off was great. But I really love the shrines in particular in both of those games. They're these like little kind of challenge rooms which have like either puzzles or combat challenges or whatever. And there are well over 100 of them in each game.
There are lots, yeah.
And it's really hard to keep track of like where they are and which ones you've done and which ones you haven't. And a large part of it, and this is maybe probably a little divisive, but a large part of it is that you're supposed to find them. Like you're supposed to find the shrines, and finding them is not always the easiest thing in the world. But for me, it's like I'm gonna find half of them by myself just to say that I did it, and then like I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I'm just gonna use the app and find the rest of them with the app.
Yeah, at some point you just find yourself wandering around aimlessly, hoping that you'll find a shrine. Because
exactly, it was helpful.
Right.
When they updated Breath of the Wild with there's this thing that was I think it was called like History Path or something like that showed like if you open up the map you could turn on this like almost Google Maps layer that would show you everywhere you've been, and then I would just go to the places I'd never been before and see if there were shrines there.
Yeah, definitely. So what about MK World Travel Guide? I have actually not used this one.
Yeah, this was the one that really blew my mind because it came out like the day after the Switch or something. It was like after the Switch 2. It was like pretty immediate, and basically keeps track of the two main collectibles in the open world in the game, which are P-switches, which are these like big buttons you can hit that are around the open world in Mario Kart World, which allow you to do like a little kind of racing challenge, or there's a bunch of different things that the P-switches can do, but there are I think close to, if not 300 of them, somewhere in that vicinity.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of them, and there's no way in game to keep track of them, where they are, or which ones you've completed, which is really annoying. So that's a big one. Then the other one are Peach medallions, which are these just like big floating coins that are hidden in kind of precarious places that you need to do a lot of exploring and a lot of kind of outside the box thinking to be able to both find and reach. And there are, I think, again, 100, 200 of those hidden around the world. So
I didn't realize there were so many of these things, because I have not played the open world version as much as I have the other things.
That's the big missing link with Mario Kart World, I think, for a lot of people, is like the actual Mario Kart of it all is fantastic, and the world part, I think, leaves a lot to be desired for a lot of people. I have a hunch that people will grow much more fonder of it in retrospect. I think it's one of those things that in 10 years, looking back, when the next Mario Kart comes out or whatever, people are going to look back on Mario Kart World's open world and be like, that was actually great. There's something very zen, I think, about the experience of just driving around this big open space, just trying to find little floating coins. But
it's definitely a trend with Nintendo these days, having that kind of aspect to their games. I mean, even Donkey Kong Bonanza has that aspect of it where you can just go around bashing things, and it's weirdly relaxing in its own way.
I'm surprised Jeffrey hasn't released a Donkey Kong Bonanza companion yet.
Yeah,
now that I'm thinking
Jeffrey,
about it.
Come on, we'd love that. That would be great. Where are my bananas? Where are my fossils?
Yeah, I don't want to pressure you, Jeffrey, but I would buy it. Just saying.
Yeah, likewise. The last app in this category I wanted to mention is Ketchup by Ben McCarthy, because Ketchup is, Ben is known for impeccable design, and I think this app absolutely has that. It's a Pokedex, basically. You can go through and check out all the details on every Pokemon in the Pokemon games, and it's just a great companion app. There are lots of these out there on the App Store, lots of companion apps for Pokemon, but Ketchup is by far my favorite one.
Yeah, big same here. Ketchup has become like the thing I use for every Pokemon game I play now. It is just so well designed. Ben won my heart forever by releasing an app called Aether, which was literally built for just like matching up Pokemon types.
Right. You get to see what the battle stats are and how they'll fare. Yeah.
But that whole app basically made its way into Ketchup as well, in terms of the ways in which typing matchups work out. But I love Ketchup. I have played through multiple Pokemon games over the past like year or two while this has been out, and it has been like an indispensable tool for both of those or all of those playthroughs, I guess I should say. It's great app. I can't recommend it highly enough. It is worth mentioning, I think, that the monetization model, if I'm remembering correctly, because I bought it almost immediately, but I think the monetization model is you get the first generation for free, but you have to pay to unlock the rest of the Pokedex, which I could see turning some people off. But for me, I mean, I just spent 8 seconds in the app and I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I have always wanted. And then I bought it.
I actually think it was the right approach for the monetization of it, because I mean, it gives you a nice taste for what the app is like. I mean, you get a feel for what a great reference guide it is and the utility of using it as you play a game. And then if if that's something you need, you'll know it and you'll be willing to pay for it, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it. Catch Up is great.
Yep.
Big
absolutely.
recommend from me, definitely.
So let's maybe switch gears to, we talked about video game trackers, but we haven't really talked about media trackers in general.
Yeah.
And I think that this is one of those things that I think for me, I go back and forth all the time on, because there's a lot to be said for having an app that's dedicated to a certain kind of media. And so whether it's Backlogged or Game Track or Game Pal or Gaming Buddy, any of these that are specifically designed for video games, I think there's a lot to be said for that, especially because video games have unique characteristics that are very different than, whether it's books or TV or movies and that kind of thing. And so I think more often than not, I do gravitate for video games towards a dedicated video game app. But there are a lot of apps that allow you to do this more broadly if maybe you're not as deep into tracking your video game library and playtime, where you can just incorporate it alongside things like books and movies and that sort of thing. And the two that I've used probably the most for that kind of thing are Sofa and Sequel, both of which are excellent trackers that handle all kinds of things. Sofa can do essentially now anything. I've tracked restaurants in it and places I want to visit.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, because I
didn't know that.
You can create now custom categories, and using URLs and stuff, you can track. I've tracked, like, here are restaurants that I want to visit in the area, or here are towns in North Carolina that I haven't visited yet that I'd like to see sometime. Various things like that. But it got its start with media because it's a downtime organizer, and you can track books and podcasts and music and movies and TV and all that. And Sequel's another one that I think is really strong. Both of them having great designs, taking very different approaches, but both being useful for video games as well as other types of media.
Yeah, I was going to mention Sequel is the other big media tracker that I use kind of on a personal level. So, I have Backlogged and some other ones that I'm about to talk about just for like specific kinds of media. But Sequel I use as a catch-all specifically as a to-do list. It's essentially like ironically, it's my backlog. There are specific projects that I have been working on here and there, kind of in the background, that require me to play a bunch of games or watch a bunch of movies or watch a bunch of TV or whatever. And I wanted an app that was kind of a catch-all that could just serve as that to-do list function, that also, had all this metadata and list building functions that was just personal, just for me. And it's been super helpful in that regard. So Sequel also is kind of like making my job easier, which is great.
Yeah. Once again, don't put your TV shows in your task manager. That's another one. It's it's probably a bridge too far. And I've used Sequel for a very similar thing where I will have categories that are very general for different kinds of media of things that I want to watch or do. And then I will move them to a different list after I've done that. And that list is my Mac Stories Unwind list, because Federico and I make our media picks every week. And that's where I kind of keep that stuff so I don't forget about it if maybe it's something I'm not going to talk about right away.
Yeah. Just very quickly, I want to shout out two more apps that are specific to certain kinds of media. Number one is Letterboxd, which I've already mentioned. I love Letterboxd. I think that app is great.
App.
I love the community. I love reading people's little quippy reviews. I went to a movie theater yesterday. I saw 2 movies in a row, and my favorite thing anytime I go see any movie is immediately opening up Letterboxd afterwards and reading a bunch of reviews and seeing what people thought about it. The other app that I want to shout out, because I think it flies under the radar more often than not, is Storygraph. I feel like everybody's heard of Goodreads, which is for tracking
I want to hear
books.
more about this, because I know Storygraph, but I've not used it myself.
Yeah, Storygraph came out, I want to say 2-ish years ago at this point, and basically exists purely as a Goodreads alternative. So Goodreads is helpful, I think, for a lot of people, especially if they're in the Kindle ecosystem, because it automatically it's owned by Amazon, and if you're reading a thing on Kindle, you can automatically have it track that thing and your progress in Goodreads, and that's cool, and that's great for people who use that. On the flip side, there are a lot of people who want to bail from the Amazon ecosystem and just don't want to give Jeff Bezos more money, which I think is understandable. Mr. Venice himself, and they want a different app, and Storygraph exists as that other app. And somebody I worked with a couple of years ago when I was at Marvel showed it to me and was like, hey, you might be interested in this, and I know a bunch of other people who you also know who have signed up for this. So it has those community aspects as well. It has some great like user run features in terms of the ways in which they recommend books to you, which I think is really powerful. I found a couple books through Storygraph's recommendation engine, which ended up becoming some favorites of mine, which is very cool. And not a thing that, I thought Goodreads was particularly good at, or even Amazon, to be frank. So it's a cool app. I think, there's some rough edges in terms of design. I think specifically the thing that will maybe rub a lot of people the wrong way, and it does me every single time, is when you go to actually say that you have read a book, it gives you like a questionnaire for every time you do that, instead of just being like, did you watch this? Yes or no? What did you think? You could rate it out of 5. Like Backlogged and Letterboxd both just have like an empty text box and like stars out of 5. This is like a drop down to select 1 through 5, and then a drop down to select like 0.25, 0.5, or 0.75, and then like 15 other questions. The thing about it is that, first of all, you don't need to fill it all out. But second of all, if you do, what that's actually helping is that recommendation engine. So much of that stuff is what they're using to power that engine. So, there are pros and cons. It's like, how much of a good citizen do you want to be in terms of that community is the question. But I was a fan of Goodreads for a long time, and then over time found that it got kind of muddled, and I knew less and less people using it, and the community aspect again is very important to me. So I just kind of like gravitated away from using it. Like I still have a Kindle. I still read all my books on Kindle for the most part. But Storygraph is now where I'm tracking all the books that I read. It's great. I like it a lot.
I'll have to check it out. I'm not a big book reader, I have to admit. I read a lot, but it's almost all internet-based stuff. But I have a few books I actually want to read this summer, so maybe I'll give it a quick.
Do you like King Arthur stories? Do you like Arthurian?
I do. I read a lot of the old original King Arthur stuff years and years ago.
I can recommend it, but I'll hang on. I'll get a copy. This is for the viewers at home.
Okay.
This book, The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. I have 2 copies of this and a Kindle version because I loved it so much. I bought this like limited edition one because I was
that's a good looking book.
But The Bright Sword is about what happens to England after King Arthur dies. Like what happens to the rest of the Knights of the Round Table. Incredible book. I've read it multiple times. I can't recommend it highly enough. It kind of got me back into reading in a big way, and ever since I read this,
very cool. I love it. All right,
stuff.
That's great. Great recommendation. You know what? Before we go, I do want to mention just one more app, because I would be remiss if I did not mention Quick Reviews by Matt Birchler, who is one of the co-hosts of Comfort Zone on Mac Stories. And Matt had been doing these quick reviews for, I think, years, really, as a web-based app, because and then he turned it into an actual app on the App Store for iOS and iPadOS. And it's really nice because it's just a simple way to create a nice looking mini review that you can publish to social media with artwork, a brief explanation of what you liked or didn't like about it, and then a rating. There's like 4 options. There's like didn't like it, decent, liked it, or loved it. And I think it's just a great way to share kind of your experience on various social media platforms, even if you don't use something like Letterboxd. It's got a little bit of a Letterboxd vibe to it, I guess, in a way, in terms of its approach.
Yeah, I love quick reviews. The design is great. I should be using it more than I am.
Yeah. No, I should too. And I just got another beta of it recently, and that's why it came to mind. And I'm gonna get on the bandwagon, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, you know what? I actually have to mention one more, Brendon.
Sure.
Brendon, I discovered something called Ally Pro recently. Do you know what this app is?
No.
This is for tracking your Amiibo. So
Okay.
what you if you have a bunch of Amiibo,
Yeah.
you can actually, with this app, you can scan them and it will add them to a catalog of your Amiibo with a great design and all the details about them, like what games they work in, what items you get in which games if you use them. And it stores that NFC code inside the app.
That's what I was about to ask.
So that you have a backup of your Amiibo.
So can you use your iPhone then from that point on as the Amiibo? Is that the idea?
No, you cannot do that.
Okay.
You cannot do that. I think that is probably a legal constraint.
Probably.
They don't want to get crosswise with Nintendo. It's just a storage solution, really.
Yeah.
But it's really helpful in the same kind of way that like some of the things like ACNH Travel Guide are. There's both a free and a pro version. I forget what the differences are. I got the pro version because I don't know. I was looking at Amiibo recently and thinking, I collected all these Animal Crossing Amiibo during COVID, and I just don't have the room to put them out anywhere to display all of them. And I usually have a couple of Amiibo on a shelf or something here and there. But I want to be able to use them more in games. And I was thinking about, some of the new Switch 2 games that support Amiibo that I have already. And a lot of them are in a bin in a closet. So I've started to scan them into this Ally Pro app so that I can see which games that they work with. And then, just rotate them into my collection from now and then, out of the box and into production when I'm playing a game.
That's interesting. I'm going to check this out. I actually don't have that many Amiibos, but I do want to download this and try it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Ally Pro.
Yeah, that's the pro version that I ended up picking up. It's pretty cool.
Sick.
Great photography too. Shows a picture of the Amiibo, has all the details. It's made in New Zealand, I think.
Nice. 7 Glyphs Limited is the name of the developer there.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this episode of App Stories in the Post-Show. Brendon and I are going to wrestle over what are the iOS games that defined mobile gaming on the iPhone.
Head to head.
We're going to try to come up with a single list. We don't know the rules yet. We're going to work out the rules in the post show, but that's for App Stories Plus listeners. If you want to subscribe to App Stories Plus, you can go to appstories.plus, or you can become a Club Mac Stories Premier member, which gets you App Stories Plus, as well as all the other benefits of being a club member. And just go to plus.club to learn more about what those various perks are. And in the meantime, first of all, I want to thank you, Brendon, for joining me for the main show and the post show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you filling in for Federico, who's out on assignment. And of course, you can find Brendon. He's over at wavelengths.online. Check out his writing there. Lots of great stuff there, plus his YouTube channel. Brendon's been doing a lot of videos lately, and I really enjoy checking out your channel and having more content from you than ever, which is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. Even more to come, if you can believe it.
Yes, I have gotten a sneak peek at some of the things that are coming, and I think people are going to really enjoy it. So keep an eye on Brendon. So. He's got a lot of big things to announce in the near future. Yes. And of course, you can find me and Federico at macstories.net, and you can find both me and Brendon on social media. Just search for our names there. It's the easiest way to find us wherever we happen to be. Talk to you later, Brendon.
Bye, everyone.